It is still iBrand Daybreak. The major focus of conversation this morning, actually, former Zamfara State Governor Ahmed Yerima's recent recommendation that dialogue should be initiated with bandits as a means to end insurgency in Nigeria has sparked a heated debate. While it is crucial to explore all possible solutions to address the security crisis in the country, the idea of negotiating with violent criminals should be approached with extreme caution. Middle Belt and Northern leaders have rejected a call by the former governor of Zamfara State asking President Bola Tinubu to negotiate with terrorists and bandits in the country. In their separate views, they argued that such negotiations will continue to fail because the bandits do not have a central command of leadership and they never kept the agreements reached with some of them in the past by some states and communities in the north. And of course, to further have this conversation with us this morning is Mr. Matthew Oluku. Good morning, Mr. Matthew. You're welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let us take an analysis of Governor Yerima's bandits negotiation proposal. There is this saying in the streets that there are people you do not have conversations with. There are people that you just need to set your boundaries and keep it straightforward like that. And I feel like that also applies to bandits and terrorists. How do you even begin to negotiate with them? But that is, as we go further in this conversation, we'll probably get to that point. But first of all, I want us to look at this Governor Yerima's negotiation proposal. How do you react to that?
I think it's quite unfortunate that somebody who should know better, who have once served as a governor of a state that is ravaged by banditry, should be advising the government to start negotiating with bandits. For me, I think it's a no-go area because we are talking about a sovereign state and we are talking about a group that have no justification to take to arm. So on what basis are you negotiating? So I think it should be discouraged, and I think no responsible government will go and start negotiating with bandits. There are some instances where you can negotiate, not under this scenario. Perhaps you have some Nigerians who are in captivity and rescue is not, there is no guarantee that you secure the safety of the people you want to go for, you want to rescue. If you are negotiating on that basis to get those Nigerians out of captivity is reasonable. But asking Nigeria as a sovereign state to negotiate with the bandits, I think is regrettable and it should be discouraged.
All right, he has been a governor in a state that has been majorly ravaged by banditry and terrorism. I'm speaking about Zamfara State now. For the history of this whole banditry conversation in Nigeria, it has always revolved around that path of the north, especially in Zamfara State. Is this an offtake of his negotiations as a governor? Was it successful? And I'm trying to understand where that conversation emanated from for him, and how his mind works. How did we even get to the point where we're trying? Are we out of solutions? Are we out of ideas on how to solve this banditry issue?
I think the issue is, as a country, as a sovereign state that Nigeria is supposed to have monopoly of coercive power. But unfortunately, I don't think we have that. Because if we have that, nobody will be advising government to negotiate with criminals. Because as far as I'm concerned, when you talk about bandits or banditry, they are criminals. So for me, I think Nigeria should get to the point where they are able to exercise their strength. Because what we should be hearing is the bandit begging that they want to surrender arm, and as such, perhaps when they surrender arm, they should not be prosecuted, and the government will be weighing the option of whether to give them amnesty or not. Not asking government to negotiate, or negotiate from the point of weakness of what. So I think we should be able to exert our power on all Nigerian sovereignty in our territorial integrity within our borders. So asking Nigeria as a sovereign state to negotiate is an affront to Nigeria as a country.
Now, let's discuss about the fact that we need to understand where this emanated from. The issue of banditry, give us an analysis of how it started, vis-a-vis the point where we are right about now, where a negotiation is about to be considered, so to speak. Now, what is the history about this issue of banditry? How did it start, by the way?
Okay, but first of all, let me quickly tell you that this is not the first time some persons or some level of government will be tinkering with issue of negotiation. The Zamfara State government have tinkered with it in the past. And the problem, if for any reason negotiation should be a thing to consider, the bandits themselves do not have a central control system. So that goes to show that if you negotiate with a particular group, it may not be binding on the other group that operates in Zamfara. Perhaps you negotiate with people that operate in Katsina. So to that extent, it's difficult to have a unified control system and who to deal with. Even if you are having a unified system, it is still not wise as a country you start negotiating with criminals. I've read about somebody trying to compare them with the situation in the Niger Delta where they were granted amnesty. They are quite different two scenarios. Because if you look at the time Yar'Adua granted amnesty to militants, the agitation was clear. They were agitating for marginalization. They were agitating for oil, the degradation of the environment. So these were issues they were agitating for. And they could offer themselves for negotiation. The government officials could visit them. I could remember Jonathan, as a vice president then, visited the creeks to have engagement with the then militants. But I don't think it's practically possible to ask a vice president of Nigeria to visit the bandits in the forest and come back alive.
Now you are beginning to understand where I'm coming from, because already the militants in the south already had their grievance, which you just enumerated, one of which is degradation of the land and of course their waterways. And of course they've been marginalized for the most part because the resources of the state comes from there and they are not considered when it comes to the sharing formula of a thing. Now, what is the grievance, or how did the issue of banditry come into being?
But what I want to say may be speculative, but it's in the media space. One, there are some claim that some politicians brought them, some of them, from other parts of the country, of the world, for purpose of election in 2015. These are unverified information and is speculative. So I cannot be assertive about it. Then there's another argument that, in fact, it's not an argument. Fulani herdsmen claim majorly that their cows is always being rustled by perhaps ravaging and Fulani maybe from other parts of the world. And as such, the government is not able to protect them. They now use it as an excuse to take to crime. They themselves form themselves into bandit groups and start terrorizing the community. But I think one thing is clear. Nigeria as a state, as a sovereign state, have no reason allowing Fulani people to go about with sophisticated weapons. That is clear. Because if you look at the Nigeria as a sovereign state, you as a citizen, as a private citizen, have no right to go about carrying AK-47, AK-49. So where do we get to the point where Fulani herdsmen will be at liberty to move with sophisticated weapons? I think the government should think of how to disarm them.
Good. Now, the issue of they not being citizens is number one, because they do not reside in this country. Like you said, speculative anyway, that they were brought in by some politicians. So of what, justification would they be riding on when it comes to now taking up arms to go terrorizing people with a perceived notion that their cows were rustled?
No, you cannot say totally that all Fulanis in Nigerian territory are not Nigerians. Because even this, Bauchi State Governor have said that over 70% of the people in Bauchi are Fulani. So that bears that perhaps
do they carry our
explain that.
passports?
Of course, they should. No, what I'm trying to say in a sense is there are some indigenous Fulani in Nigeria. But even at that, it's not a justification to take to arm. But what they are claiming is that it behoves on the government to protect them, even with their business. Because the constitution is unambiguous about the welfare of Nigerians and their security. That it shall be the primary purpose of governance, going by section 14 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. So to that extent, if a Fulani man is genuinely doing his business, and you know how the Fulani business runs, a father could leave 1,000 cow, 2,000 for the children, and that is their inheritance. They share it. And this is something you would have developed, you would have nurtured over the years. Suddenly, because you are not being protected by the government, somebody will come from nowhere and rustle your cow. Let's be frank, you will not be happy about it. So the normal Fulani personnel who are nomadic in nature, who do their business in Nigeria, should equally need protection. So I think the government need to, I think the conversation have been on for a long time, to the extent that even the common man on the street knows the solution. And the solution is not far-fetched, it's ranching. But the argument is, like what the government was doing before this government came on board, I mean Muhammad Buhari's government, you are doing ranching and the government is bankrolling it at the expense of federal government. Now the question is, do you take up the business, or do you use government fund to finance personal business? So, but I think, however I look at it, ranching is the way to go. It's another thing to look at ways to address it in such a way that you make the headers, not just the header, because there are other people who may even want to go into ren or cow that may not be Fulani persons. You make them to commit to building those ranches. I know it's capital intensive. Or if the federal government is building it, let it be that they are leveraging on it and federal government will earn revenue from it, not building and handing over to, it to the headers. And there's another fear that if you give out land for ranching, nobody, that breach of trust is already there. I don't think there's any community in the southern part of the country, even states, that will be willing to give out land for ranching, because there's that fear that once you give it out, the Fulani will dominate it.